Chapter 1. Davis. The first thing I noticed wasn't the house itself. It was the media circus out front. Vans with broadcasting equipment bolted to the roof lined the quaint, tree-lined street leading up to the iron gates. Reporters wandered up and down the sidewalk, interviewing people or capturing video and still photos of the mansion on the hill. After finding a parking spot farther down the road, I collected my overnight bag from the back seat of the car and wandered slowly back toward the gates. A slight, chilly breeze rattled dry leaves against the trunks of the trees lining the street, and the shadows of 3 dark birds flapped up into the sky from a nearby branch. The exterior of the inn was shabbier than I'd remembered, paint faded and peeling, 2 or 3 of the couple dozen shutters falling off or missing slats, and all of the trees and surrounding shrubbery were overgrown and leaning everywhere like a cluster of lazy teenagers too cool to visit a barber shop. But fuck if the house itself wasn't as stunning as always. The bones of it were strong and elegant, with a curved mansard roof, witches' caps atop twin rounded towers on either side of the structure, and arched windows for days. It had intrigued me for years, and if I was being honest, something about the inn had called to me from a very young age. I'd grown up in Pine Hollow, had known the inn my entire life. But the inn hadn't seen guests since those early days of my youth. Something had happened to the family who'd owned it, and the doors had been shuttered overnight. I'd been too young at the time to understand what was going on, so it wasn't until years later I learned the truth. The Maberly sisters had driven the owners mad. At least, that was what the owners had claimed at the time. The Privet family had purchased the inn in the early 1950s from a family who'd inherited it 30 years before that from the Maberly estate. After running a successful bed and breakfast for over 40 years, the Privets suddenly found themselves haunted by the 3 tortured souls of Abigail, Bettina, and Calamity Maberly. According to Emily and Tony Privet, that was the absolute truth, whether people believed them or not. They didn't. So the Privets had left, packed up and moved to a retirement community in sunny Florida. But they'd passed away a few years ago, and the realtors had tried everything to dispose of the assets so they could put the estate to rest. Unfortunately, the house had seen many rounds of buyer's remorse, which meant the listing agent was desperate to have done with it once and for all. I'd wanted to swoop in and be one of those buyers so badly. Every time the inn had come up for sale, I tried my hardest to figure out how to afford it, but it had been impossible. Until my grandfather had died 4 months earlier, leaving me money in an inheritance. And now it was almost happening. If I could just last the weekend in the house and outstay the other competitors, I could have it at a tiny fraction of what it was actually worth, and I'd have the cash to make it happen. No matter how many times I lost the opportunity, I still held out hope. I still wanted it. If I was being honest, I'd wanted it since I was a little boy riding my bike down the old road and fantasizing about all the hidden passages there must be inside of it. I'd been so busy imagining what was inside, I hadn't seen the giant rock right in front of me. My body had gone right over the handlebars, landing me in a tangle of limbs and sharp pricker bushes. The inn had closed down the year before, so I knew I was on my own. But I hadn't been alone. The nicest trio of little old ladies had swooped in to help. "Oh dear, Cal, gather his bicycle there. Betty, a glass of water, maybe. Davis, honey, can you open your eyes for us?" I'd blinked at them. "Who are you?" I'd lived in Pine Hollow my whole life and knew every single person in town, even when I was only 10. The woman had glanced worriedly at the lady picking up my bike and setting it against the iron fence.